Hey Minot, 2020 is the year for more. Yes, it's the U.S. Census season, and with it, Minot could see more. More opportunities for business, more federal funding for roads, for our schools, and for our community. Take part in something more. Take the census, because for us, more means more. Visit minotnd.org to learn more.
We'll call the meeting to order for the special city council for today, Monday, March 9th, 2020. It is 3:30. I would ask that everyone turn your electronic devices either off, onto silent, or vibrate so we can keep the distractions to a minimum. We do have another special city council meeting in 1 hour, so we will try to be of our time frame that we are working on and move expeditiously as possible. Roll call, please.
Janser?
Here.
Olson? Here. Pittner?
Here.
Padragula?
Here.
Straight?
Here.
Wolski?
Here.
Sitma?
Here. Pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God.
Ending with this issue, that being city employees. Moving forward, I think first we would take a look at the motion and a second pertaining to the agenda item, and I have one question for our Human Resource Director at that point, and then we will proceed. So I'd be looking for a motion for consideration on number 3.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Wolski.
I would move that the City of Minot retain outside independent counsel to conduct an investigation into allegations of a hostile work environment. This motion shall include the following. 1, that the investigation include a review of potential civil, criminal, and City of Minot policy violations. 2, we direct the city attorney to evaluate and secure outside counsel and authorize the mayor to sign any necessary paperwork. 3, upon securing counsel, the mayor shall call a special meeting of the city council for the purposes of providing additional direction to our legal counsel. 4, upon conclusion of the investigation, the findings shall be delivered to the city council. And 5, funding for this action shall come from the city attorney's budget for technical expertise.
We do have a motion. Is there a second?
I'd like to second it.
Second by Alderman Padragula. And I would, at this time, just like to ask our Human Resource Director, Lisa, just for clarification from, I think, everyone here, with just one question from myself, and if anybody has any, we can certainly follow up. But Lisa, at this point, has any complaints been filed to your office for any consideration of a hostile working environment?
Mr. Mayor, I have not received any formal complaint in my office.
Okay, thank you, Lisa. Any further questions for our HR Director, Ms. Alderman Lisa Olson?
Ms. Johns, I've done a little research on my own, but I'm certainly not a HR specialist. So I would like to know your definition or the city's definition of a hostile work environment.
Alderman Olson, Mayor Stiff, I'm just going to read it right from our manual. Workplace harassment or hostile work environment is defined as an unwelcome conduct, whether verbal, physical, visual, or innuendos that are derogatory, abusive, disparaging, bullying, threatening, or disrespectful types of behavior, even if unrelated to a legally protected status, when such conduct has the purpose to affect unreasonably interfering with an individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. And that is directly from our handbook.
Thank you.
Any further questions for our Human Resource Director? Seeing none, thank you, Lisa. Further discussion on the motion. Alderman Patagula.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've prepared some remarks. I want to explain to the people on the dais, all of them, to city employees and to the general public why I am supporting an independent investigation into allegations of a potential hostile work environment. I want to rattle off about 9 or 10 things. The first thing I want to say is that although I've heard lots of rumors and lots of things out on the internet and social media, I don't really pay much attention to that kind of stuff. I'm not even on social media. Point number 2 I'd make is that things changed last week when what appeared to be actual city documents became public. Point 3, the more I read those, the more I looked into them, the more concerned I became. The fourth point I want to mention is that as psychologists, and that's what I've been for 40 years, we have certain ethical principles and standards and ways of doing things. They don't necessarily apply to my role as a city councilman, but I think they provide some guidance. And the first thing that our experts tell us, and then I tell my students and supervisees, is if you think there's a problem, an ethical issue or a performance issue, something significant, you really need to take it seriously. You can't sweep it under the rug. You can't ignore it. Even if it might be painful or anxiety-producing or might lead to conflict, you have to stop, step back a bit, and really take a look at it. And I did that. And when I did that, I became concerned. The second bit of advice that's normally given is to consult with a colleague. And that's what I did. I slept on it, and just as I was about to call a colleague, they called me. We talked about it briefly. We were concerned about what we each were hearing and seeing, and ended up talking with still another colleague. The more we talked, the more we thought about it, the more concerned we became. The third step, and this is, I think, the key point here, the standard advice if you have a potential conflict is get legal advice. As former National Security Assistant to the President, John Bolton, said, talk to the lawyers. We did that. And that's where it becomes significant for me, and that's what's motivating my support of this motion. The things I learned from that consultation, the things I came away with were 3. First, that this is a serious situation. Second, the city was or could be, if the allegations were true, in significant legal jeopardy. And third, that we really had to act. The law looks at it this way, as best as I understand it. If you're in a position of authority, if you know something may be going wrong, if you know that or should have known that, you have to act. You can't sit there. If you act, you really make the situation much worse. I also, in this part of my remarks, the last point, I also took an oath to support the laws of our state and the ordinances of our city, and to be faithful to the welfare of the city. And I take my oaths very seriously. Now, I want to give a little bit of context for why I'm coming to this decision. First of all, I've received input from lots of different sources. Some of them I know well and have a lot of respect for. Several people who have contacted me have been former members of the City Council, and I take what they say with some significant respect. It's not, I want to emphasize not, because of what some blogger said or what was on social media or the internet. I don't mean any disrespect to Alderman Walski, who does media stuff and blogging, but I don't pay a whole lot of attention to that stuff. So it's not because of what some individual said. There were 2 other things that made me more sensitive to this issue and have kind of led me to the conclusion I'm coming to today, at least so far. A couple of weeks ago, I spent a full week in Washington, D.C., attending a series of workshops in forensic psychology. And one of the recurring themes, which I've said before, has been the importance of ethics and acting ethically. And the 3 steps I've outlined, think about it, take it seriously, talk to a colleague, get legal advice, repeatedly came up during those workshops. And it sensitized me, made me more sensitive to the possibility of some issues. The other thing, and I hadn't really been thinking about this consciously and hadn't taken it into account until a couple of days ago, is for the past 3 or 4 months I've been involved as a consultant, as an expert witness in a complicated legal case. It has nothing whatsoever to do with the city or any of the parties that might or might not be involved in this. But this case actually has to do with employment. It has to do with issues of discrimination or alleged discrimination, a hostile work environment, retaliation, and the legal responsibilities of an employee. And when I thought about that, it made me, again, more sensitive to the issues involved here. One of the things that happens is that, again, if you're in a position of authority and you have reasonable cause to suspect something's happening, you have to take action. You have to dig into it. You have to find out. The person who ignores the advice of their attorney is in a very, very risky position. Now, there were some things that came up today, too, that I want to comment on that were important. I've gotten messages of support for one particular employee, and I want to emphasize, and also complaints, and I want to emphasize that I'm trying to stay at arm's length from those, that this is not a referendum or popularity contest. It's not a rehashing of a contract negotiation, of a salary increase, or anything like that. It's not even about performance, although that may eventually be an issue or may be tied into it. For me, the primary issue, and where my responsibility has to start, is that of the city's welfare and potential legal liability, which I think is quite significant. So I'm going to be supporting this call for an independent, fair, objective, outside investigation based on legal advice. I think that's my responsibility as a member of the governing body of the City of Minot.
Further discussion on the motion.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Olson,
a question for Alderman Padrigula.
please.
Whose legal advice are you following, sir?
I'm relying on the advice of our city attorney.
Thank you.
There also, I think, was another attorney involved in the situation, but I did not directly speak with them.
Thank you.
Further discussion on the motion. This is also an opportunity for those who have standing to address the issue. And again, those who have standing with the issue, as we would be hiring an outside counsel to seek whether or not there is a hostile working environment would relate to the employees. Alderman Straight, you had your hand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. From my standpoint, I took an oath to the citizens of Minot and to each and every employee of the city of Minot to uphold legally the responsibilities of this job. We ran as trying to instill not just public trust, but to elevate the accountability of this seat. And that is why I'm going to support this today. It's for all of our employees. And I concur with Alderman Padrigula that that is why it is critical that we have outside counsel look at this issue, and in part that it's important when not that we wait and hope that some filing or some grievance is charged to the city of Minot. It is out of an abundance of responsibility that I am going to vote in support of this today. So.
Further discussion on the motion. Alderman Olson.
Mr. Mayor, I have a lot of concerns today. I have a lot of concerns for our employees. We are tasked with employing several hundred employees, and I think that it is our responsibility to protect them, to respect them. However, at this point, we have not had any grievances filed. So I don't exactly know what we're investigating. In response to Alderman Padragula, he says that he is not paying attention to a blogger, but it appears right now that we are going on the source of one person's blog. I would like to hear from employees before I move into an outside counsel. I think that we're skipping steps along the way.
Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question for everyone on the council. We asked the same question of Lisa, our HR director, but I would ask the same question of anyone on this dais, mainly the council members and mayor. Was the idea of a hostile work environment brought to the attention of any of us in the past?
I will unequivocally answer that issue, or that answer is no from me, which is why I asked our Human Resource Director. Alderman Padragula.
I wanted to respond to Alderman Pittner. I have not received any formal complaints. But again, I've heard things, people have reported secondhand things, and after a while, I try to tune that out as much as I can, but after a while, you start wondering. In particular, Alderman Olson asked me about a blogger. There have been several, at least 3 or 4, very critical, very negative blogs by one particular blogger. I think his name is Port, to be honest with you. I've deliberately ignored those, and in fact, and not paid much attention, because it seems like it's a lot of rumor. And the change happened when I saw pictures of what purported to be city documents. People are going to gripe, people are going to complain. That's part of the turf, and that's why I don't territory, and that's why I don't pay a whole lot of attention to it. But when you see something that purports to be a document, I also should point out that one of those blogs I found particularly offensive to several city employees. And I called them and offered them personal support. I told them what I was reading was absolute garbage, and I felt it was highly inappropriate what was being said about them. I reached out to the people who were singled out personally and offered that support. So, I try to take what I see with a grain of salt or sometimes a barrel of salt. But the turning point was that purported set of documents. The other issue is that, again, I'm not a lawyer here, but one of the concerns is that I think you need to act or can act if adverse legal action is, quote, reasonably predictable, close quote. So I don't think that you have to wait until a complaint is filed to do something. In fact, I think if you wait, you get into more trouble. You can't take action to mitigate or reduce the risk to you or the city, or to counsel an employee or institute any kind of protective or corrective measures. That's part of my concern, that there's enough floating out there where I think we're at risk. And I think we need somebody outside of the city to tell us what that risk might be and how we might handle it. That's one thing I want to be absolutely clear about. I'm not suggesting any action against any city employee. What I am suggesting is that I think we have a responsibility, given the way things have progressed, to take a long, hard look. The results may be negative. I would love it if the results said, nope, everybody did the right thing, there's no reason to be worried, you're safe legally, no violence, no violation of ordinance or anything like that. But I can't say that anymore. And that's why I feel obligated to take a look. So again, I'm not saying we should do anything in the way of disciplinary action, performance, negative performance appraisals, or anything. I'm saying there's enough here where I feel obligated to take a look.
Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. You answered the question. I think I saw Alderman Olson shaking her head no. Alderman Padragula had said only secondhand. Anybody else care to elaborate on that? If they've heard anything from employees or department heads of a possible hostile work environment, I'd welcome any more comment on that.
If I could correct and clarify that, since that original thing that happened, those documents, I have heard personally, and that's what I mentioned earlier when I said I had heard from people I respect, people I know. I guess I don't want to get into the details because I don't want to subject anybody to any embarrassment or humiliation. But there have been 2 people very closely connected with the city who are or have been employees who've reported information to me that makes me really worried. And that happened subsequent to, happen after sometime mid-last week. So yes, I did hear two firsthand direct accounts of things.
Alderman Wolski.
Mayor Sim, I'll respond to. Alderman Pittner, the answer is yes.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Olson.
I do agree with Alderman Padragula that this isn't something that we can ignore. I don't want to put my head in the sand and not look at this seriously. But as I said before, I think that we are skipping some steps. So I would like to offer an amendment to this motion. And my amendment would be this. I move that the City Council create an ad hoc committee that will solicit and accept complaints from any and all city employees that sense that they are working in a hostile work environment. Complaints may be given anonymously or directly to the committee. The process will begin on March 11th and run through March 25th, giving them 14 days to do so. The committee will review any complaints submitted and make a recommendation for further action. Further, I would recommend that that committee consist of the council president, Mark Janser, the council vice president, which would be myself, and Alderman Pittner, who has been part of the Employee Recruitment and Retention Committee.
We have a motion to amend. Is there a second? Alderman Padragula.
I'll second that in the interest of transparency and open debate.
Motion and a second to amend. I am looking over here to our city attorney as I'm guessing that there's going to be the issue of open records or a public meeting.
Mr. Mayor, first off, yeah, that would be an open meeting. If a committee is appointed to handle anything on behalf of the government agency, all of those meetings are subject to the open meetings laws. But my concern was that may be better as a separate motion in the event that the first motion fails. It's not really amending the original motion.
Okay. I will rescind my motion for the time.
I would assume the second agrees on that. Do we need a? I do need the second to rescind that as well.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you. Further discussion on the original motion? Further discussion? I realize this is an exceptionally uncomfortable time for a lot of people. I think it's uncomfortable for everyone sitting here at the dais. It's uncomfortable for everyone sitting in the audience and for many who are at home. Many might be wondering if they're not tied into social media, which in this day and age, it probably isn't that many anymore, but I would wholeheartedly agree with Alderman Olson that I feel that we're missing some steps here. I think that if we are looking for a direct address that is hiring someone to look for a problem, that to me is missing a big step. If we have one person who is going out in search of a problem that has not been through the proper channels in this case, that somewhat led us to where we are through the Human Resource Department on the proper, better business practice of how and where you file a grievance. I think that's a big part of this. I'm very aware that social media has wound this up substantially and taken it from what was an administrative day-to-day operation issue and wound it into something that it truly isn't. And has created, I think, a lot of uncomfortable atmosphere, and for most part, the city employees in regards to just morale. I feel very, I feel terrible that this is playing out in social media, whether it be through a vendetta or whatever the issue is. But that's where we're at, and that's what we have to deal with today. We do have letters of support from the Fraternal Order of the Police that are sitting in front of us. We have had other outreach from other city employees in support of our leadership, of the city manager in this leadership role. I'm fully aware also that there are a number of those out in the community that are leading out into that social media opinion column that is missing a lot of facts. I have a tough time supporting going out and looking for a problem. But on the other side, even as talking with the city attorney prior to the meeting, by saying that we don't want to go out and try to find whether or not that there's a problem of a hostile working environment is turning the better judgment of your own leadership on its head. So that's where we're at. We're kind of stuck in a position, we darned if we do and we're darned if we don't. And I could use a different word instead of darn. I feel very, very, very disappointed that we're at where we're at with this. I think we had a lot of great momentum going on within the holistic aspect of the employment within the city of Minot. The city employees have been doing phenomenal work, making very large strides in lots of different areas. And I think it was not just the turnover rate, that's kind of at the forefront of what we've been talking about, but the vast achievements in efficiencies that we take a look at. It's dang tough to go down this road looking for a problem. But in terms of legality, leadership, you're in a real, you put yourself in a real tough place, and it doesn't matter if you're elected or not, by turning your back on it or saying that it doesn't exist, when there's a handful of people that have turned a mountain from a molehill. Alderman Straight.
Mr. Mayor, I think we owe it to every single employee of the city of Minot that we distance ourselves from this and we seek outside counsel. Not just the fact that we have put our HR director in an uncomfortable spot, we've put our city attorney in an uncomfortable spot. They're trying to do their jobs, but I think that we owe it to every resident and every staff member to all take a step back here. I was concerned about this, as Alderman Potter-Gould had stated, because the city of Minot letterhead is showing up. And as a result of that, that implicates me. So I'm implicated in this as well. And I am kindly asking for outside counsel to review for all of us. And as a result of that, I have to own the fact that I might be at fault in some way, shape, or form. And as a result of that, I have to own that fact by sitting here today in front of all of these residents. I don't believe that I've done anything incorrectly. I try to serve to the best of my ability, but I think we owe it to everybody in this room and in this community to all take a step back. And I think, Mr. Mayor, and to Alderman Olson, I disagree. I think that there will be an appearance that we are sweeping it under the rug by appointing yourself, Alderman Janser, Alderman Pittner, to review the questions that are before us. And as a result, I want to be fair and impartial to everyone involved. And so that's why I kindly ask all of you to consider that.
Alderman Potter-Gould.
I wanted to respond to the thought that this is somehow a search for problems or a challenge to momentum. I've spoken publicly on numerous occasions how I think the administration of the city has made many positive changes, and I want them very much to continue. I want the momentum to continue. Now, I don't know how well it can continue with this kind of shadow hanging over things. The other point I would make is that I am not looking for problems. Things have been brought to our attention. People have said to me face to face or by other means that there's something going on. I am not looking for problems. I want to get to the bottom of this. I want to vindicate people if that's appropriate. I want to put rumors to rest. I also want improvements in the structure and the organization of the city and how it handles things. For example, making sure we have set up clear policies and procedures by which people can express grievances in a safe manner. If you have to report something to someone who's your superior, that's not going to happen. That's putting someone in an impossible position. I, in fact, have made a list of 8 separate things I'd like to see come from this whole affair. Improvements in our city management, improvement in protections of employees, whistleblower protection, for example. So I'm not looking for an indictment. I'm not looking for a reaming out of some person or persons. I'm looking for an accurate, objective assessment of what's going on, if anything. And then I'm looking for suggestions for improvement. When I'm asked to be an organizational consultant, that's what I do. I just don't look at the negative, I look at the positive. And in fact, I have an obligation, if I'm acting as a forensic psychologist, to specifically look for evidence that goes against what I believe or what people have told me. I have to go out there and find stuff that says, no, what you're thinking is wrong. That's how important it is to be objective, and that's where professionalism on the part of an attorney or a forensic psychologist in a psychological case is. That's what I'm asking for. I don't want to put people in the position of being afraid. And if they are afraid, I want to deal with that. I want to mitigate those risks and those potential losses. I'm by no means questioning the direction the city has been heading. I want to be emphatic about that. And I'm looking for solutions. I'm looking for ways to enable us to go even faster and better toward, I think, what we all pretty much agree on. So, someone else may be looking for problems. I'm looking to get a good, accurate impression of what's really happening here, and I'm looking for solutions.
Further discussion.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Olson.
I would argue that the motion that I put forward would get us to that step if needed. I think we are the first step. And if there are some grievances, then we would move on to that independent counsel so that we could start solving problems. But until we know if there truly is a problem, I don't know that we need to spend funds unnecessarily, to worry people unnecessarily, to increase the amount of anxiety that I think that many of our employees are currently feeling. I think we need to take it step by step.
Further discussion. Alderman Pittner.
Thank you, Mayor. Handful of things I guess I want to address. I think pushing out with an ad hoc committee, I think would create just as much anxiety or extend anxiety because the anxiety is here, it started, it's going to continue until this is either today swept under the rug or squashed or voted down, or we continue down the road of council until we get something back. So I don't think there's any getting around any anxiety. To the mayor's comments, I don't want to dilute the allegations here as far as a hostile work environment and whether it be a hostile work environment or a hostile relationship. I think there's parallels. There's a reason that we may have not seen a formal complaint. Maybe it was a hostile environment and they felt like they couldn't come forward in an abusive relationship if the person said, well, why didn't you come forward? Well, I didn't feel like I could. How am I going to, I have nowhere to stay. This is my job. I have to come to work tomorrow and work with these individuals and you'll be looked at differently. Again, I can see where someone wouldn't feel like they could make a complaint. That's the definition of a hostile work environment. And I'm disappointed as well that we're here. I'm disappointed not in anyone but myself. And the fact that I didn't feel like a person that someone could come to if they felt like they worked in a hostile environment and we had to get to this point. We had to see the city letterhead on social media. And through an open records request, and we had to get to this point through this. I too am very proud of where the city is headed. I too am very proud of the direction. I've defended city staff in the past that I'm proud of the advancements we've made, the efficiencies that we've created, and the direction where our city is going. I'm very proud of that. I'm very proud of the work that's been done by the people up here. But that does not absolve people from being imperfect and making mistakes. So again, I don't want to dilute this and say if someone feels like they're in a hostile environment that, now, you're not. That's not okay. If someone feels a certain way and feels like they can't express themselves or they can't have an opinion, and we're just going to say, you're fine, I'm not okay with that. And whatever this dais decides today, I think there are still issues that need to be addressed. And again, the disappointment lies in myself that I was not an open door, or I didn't make myself appear to be someone that someone from the city of Minot could call, because the hierarchy goes employees, city manager, council and mayor, and the citizens, okay? That's the hierarchy that we fall in. So I am always an open door. My phone number or my email or my place of employment, you can come and talk to me, because, again, we have a responsibility to everyone in this room.
Further discussion? Alderman Wolski.
Some very brief comments here. For me, this is a matter of, as an elected officer of the city, I have a legal and a fiduciary responsibility, and I am not suggesting any part of what's being contemplated here is true. We have a circumstance, we need to get to the bottom of it, and I believe this is the path forward that allows us to do that most effectively, most professionally, and with the best chance of putting this behind us.
Further discussion? Question for our city attorney as far as costs, or for Alderman Wolski perhaps, with the motion maker that is before us. What would we anticipate coming out of your line budget item for this?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I have not reached out to anyone yet about potential costs. I can tell you that in a current matter that we have with attorneys from the city of Bismarck, their hourly rate is $300 an hour, and I'm not sure how long this type of investigation would take. And Mr. Mayor, I do have money in the budget technical expertise line item that Alderman Wolski referenced, that's set aside for some of our ongoing litigation right now. However, in the event we needed to do a budget amendment to add to that later, that is possible.
Further discussion? Well, before we call the vote, I'm going to make it known why I am voting no on this. Not that I don't disagree with much of what has been said. I think that there is certainly a procedure that we're missing some steps, as Alderman Olson said. We do have an employee manual and a process for filing grievances. Absolutely, we do. And I think that was a breakdown that got us to where we're at from the beginning. Is one of those processes specifically wasn't followed. I would like to see Alderman Olson's idea brought forward as an initial step, and not to say that if some issues come to light, that exactly what Alderman Wolski and Alderman Padrigula are referencing can be forwarded very quickly. But I would like to take that step forward first with the process and procedure that we have in place to vet first whether or not this is a bigger issue, or if this is exactly what I feel it is a wind-up from social media that has turned into something that it really is not. If I end up being wrong on that, absolutely, I will own every part of it. But that is why I'm not going to support the initial motion. I would like to see the alternative come forward first. Further discussion before we vote? I think you do have standing in this discussion as well, Ms. Zietz, so you are welcome to speak.
I would just like to speak on basically behalf of myself. I've had 2 tours of duty working as a City of Minot employee. So I've been around for like 34 years now. And I also taught workplace hostility for many years, working with the crime prevention. And Mr. Pittner was exactly on target. We have probably several city employees in this room that the reason why they're not going through the grievance process is because of what can happen to them, what we see every day when we go to work. I'm involved in a lot of different departments, and I hear a lot of things, and I know these people aren't just saying it. Mrs. Olson, I'm surprised you are taking this approach as far as having a subcommittee to listen to city employees working with children and being bullied in the schools. You know that the kid that is truly a victim is not going to come out and tell you. And especially if you can imagine that child's job or their status in this school is going to be threatened like some of the rest of us working for the City of Minot. So I'm surprised at that. If you decide to wait to have legal counsel till after it happens, you're disappointing city employees. And I know not just because of me. I know that because of the people who I work with and who I stand for. And I feel an obligation to stand up here, if you can see me, to speak to you. And I have a feeling I know I'm representing some people standing behind me. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Zietz. I appreciate you coming forward.
Mr. Mayor,
Alderman Olson,
may I respond?
please.
I wasn't going to address bullying because I didn't think that it was necessarily part of this conversation, but because Ms. Zietz brought it up, that is exactly why I am bringing forward this motion, because I do have a lot of experience with students being bullied in a school setting. And the way that we define bullying is ongoing occurrences, not a one-time bad decision, but ongoing. We have students all the time that can make a bad decision. They can say something that's inappropriate. They may become physical. They make mistakes. But if it happens one time and they're able to resolve that, it is not considered bullying. It's when it goes on and on and on that we look at it as bullying.
I will give anyone in the audience an opportunity here to speak before we move forward.
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, Aaron Moss, I am an employee. I am also the president of the Souris Valley Regional Lodge Number 7 of the Fraternal Order of Police, and I represent quite a few other employees in the city as well as other law enforcement professionals throughout northwestern, north central North Dakota. What I'll speak to is in terms of this process. I've submitted a letter to each and every one of you. I'm not going to relitigate or rehash that, but I will say this: just as a person who has spent his entire adult life in public service, particularly working for different levels of government, I think we have a obligation to respect existing processes. And what I see here is kind of we're going to create our own process if we go this immediate route. There is a grievance process. If people are fearful, there's also outside independent means in which to file labor complaints in this state through the Department of Labor and Human Rights. There is a state entity that will address this very thing. For us to, as a city, to kind of create on the fly a new process because we feel that there's people that may feel intimidated by the existing process internally, there already exists another means. And I think it's, when to reference, social media concerns, I think there's also other concerns about, needlessly, or at least the perception of needlessly expending taxpayer dollars on additional projects that we don't actually need. I'm not saying an outside influence or outside evaluation, independent, as Alderman Padrigula was saying, is unwarranted. Even if it's just to prove that there's no there. That's fine. But I feel at this point, we are not being respectful of existing processes and just creating another as we go. What happens? What's the end game? If this outside process were to lead to discipline, that where there's no mechanism in place of appeal or due process, then what? Existing processes that we have in place have due process. They have means of appeal. They have, and eventually could be litigated through the courts, in certain circumstances. But these already exist, and it looks like because of, I won't say hysteria, but because of rapidly moving opinions that might not be founded in fact, we become very rightfully concerned and create a new process in the meantime. We should always recognize our responsibility as city employees and as elected officials, in your case, to respect existing due process, not just create a process for, because of sudden concerns. We should be beholden to our principles and our existing mechanisms of appeal and route of appeal.
Any questions? Alderman Patagula.
Just a response, if I could. I value very much what you say, Aaron. It's a very good perspective. I think there are two differences here. First of all, no one's being accused, no one's been indicted, no one's being tried. I think the nature of due process is somewhat different. I also want to emphasize that I'm not looking at a single employee. I'm looking at the overall picture, and especially, and this is the most important part for me, the liability that I believe the city faces. So it's not a disciplinary action, it's not a performance issue, it's not a contract issue, it's not a counseling issue. It's the fact that I'm afraid, based on legal advice, the city of Minot is liable. And I want to reduce that liability, that risk, as much as I can. That's my driving force. I could care less what some rumor is. I've gotten to the point where I have reliable information suggest to me we're legally liable, and we're obligated to protect our resources. We're obligated to protect our employees, our tax dollars, and the functioning of the institution, the progress we've made. So, I think you have a real good point there. But, again, my counter is this is not about one person. I would never support this motion if I thought we were about one person. I'm concerned about the liability of the city of Minot and the payout, unfortunately, the taxpayers ultimately might have to make. And that's part of the reason I think stepping back. I know in your field, for example, there's a lot of attention to objectivity and fairness and the avoidance of any kind of appearance of bias. When one of our police officers gets in a minor car accident with a police car, we don't investigate it. We get somebody outside the department, not because we're crooked or we're going to overlook something, but because we can't even take the possibility of a possible appearance of a conflict of interest or any kind of favoritism. That's what we do. That's what we've done for decades here. And that's one of the ways which I'm very proud of Minot and feel we're very superior in law enforcement and other areas to other communities. They're just starting to talk about this stuff. We've done it for decades. So I think that very notion of objectivity and fairness and stepping back, and again, I'm not making any charges or accusations. I'm just saying I feel a need to protect the well-being of the city of Minot as a corporate entity, as an institution. That's where I'm coming from. I just want to be very clear about that, because I respect very much what you and your colleagues in uniform do, and you have a valid point about following processes. And the process to, I think, investigate something like this really needs to be a lawyer from outside, because for one thing, we can talk with them privately. It's not a matter of public record. Open meetings and open records law don't apply. So we don't face the risk of embarrassing somebody or humiliating someone or whatever that might happen if it's brought up all to the fore in the form of a public meeting. So I'm very conscious of that. That's part of the reason I'm supporting this, because I don't want to let rumors get out of hand or expose someone to scrutiny that they really don't deserve. If we can keep it internally, if we can look at it as a risk management tool, a risk management approach, that's what I'm focused on. And I just want to make that very clear, again, because my respect for you personally and your office and the other people you work with.
May I respond, Mayor?
Absolutely, Mr. Moss.
Mayor Sitman, Alderman Padragula, I respect everything you said in regards to mitigating liability. I think anybody in my profession has to understand that there is a necessity to mitigate liability. My concern here that is also one of somebody who represents labor interests of police officers who are out there, who have to worry about liability. Now, I don't represent Mr. Barry, obviously, as a union representative. But I can speak to this when I say that should one of my members be subjected to an outside investigation that was not in place. We have outside entities that investigate our car accidents, like you say, because that's a written procedure in place. If we were to have one of my members investigated or circumstances surrounding their potential conduct investigated, and that was outside of a process that ended up potentially resulting in their discipline, where they had no means of appeal or no means of due process to be respected from the very beginning. It's like, this is the process we have in place for that. Oh, and by the way, we're not going to do that now. We're going to use this different secret process. Or, I guarantee you, as their representative, everyone here would hear from me. The Department of Labor would hear from me. Anybody interested would hear from me as far as protecting their interests. Now, while you may have a valid concern about liability when it comes to what information you have that you've had presented to you, that doesn't negate the fact that our city manager could potentially face a disciplinary process from that information when that initial process was created. So it's not that I'm saying we need to sweep everything on the rug, just declare it's not there, as others have said, and move on with our lives. I'm just saying that I don't know that this novel new approach, where there's not been fair notice, so to speak, to the potential recipient of discipline or liability in some sense, is the way to go.
Alderman Straight.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. To Alderman Pittner's earlier point, I've noticed that I didn't respond. And yes, employees have come to me. And it is for that reason of why I am supporting this tonight, Mr. Moss. And I think that it is out of, I can't be the judge, I can't be the jury, I can't be in my seat and be expected to carry out any additional processes that would even be viewed as fair or impartial, I don't think. And it's for that reason why I think I have to ask for outside counsel to protect the integrity of my seat and my job. And it is in my opinion that we, as the stewards of the dollars, have to be more responsible on the front end based on past experiences of this council. And there's an additional amount of pressure, I would say, that we do better than what has been done in the past. And it is for that reason that, to Alderman Pittner's point, I have to own my own failures in this, but I think that in order to allow legitimacy to all staff, it can't be established that the executive team or the non-executive team, I think we have to get out of the way to seem as above board as possible to the entire team that is Team Minot. So for what it's worth, sir. Thank you for your comments, so I appreciate it.
Alderman Patagula.
I wanted to also thank you. That issue of due process and notice in advance is something I hadn't thought about. And you've given me a point number 9 in terms of potential improvement that can come from this. There is, again, a slightly different situation because there's a difference between a patrol officer, for example, and in this case, unfortunately, it looks like department heads and a city manager. I think at that level, it becomes difficult for people to talk openly, and the working relationship is much closer, which makes it more problematic. But you have an excellent point, and I think that's part of the improvement in the whistleblower policies that I want to take seriously and hopefully propose and would be adopted. So I appreciate it. I hadn't thought about that before. You have a good point.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Moss. We're coming up on 4:23. Our time, as I pointed out, we have another special meeting that starts in 7 minutes, about 6 blocks from here. Of course, I would be willing to take as long as we need, because this is a very important issue. And I would look to anyone else who wishes to speak or anyone else who wishes to comment. Again, those that have standing on the issue or those here at the dais. Good afternoon.
Mr. Mayor, I am in an incredibly difficult position, but I'm in a unique position here because by city ordinance, I report directly to the city council by ordinance. So I'm in a little bit of a unique spot here. I feel I have an obligation. Obviously, I am loyal to this city. I have an obligation to look out for the best interest of this city. I also have an obligation to look out for the employees of the city. So I am in a very difficult spot here. Mr. Moss, all due respect, he brought up the process, but also we didn't follow that process a month or two ago when this other stuff happened. And I think that's a difficult problem that we have. There was no process in place then. So I struggle with that. And I with some of this stuff, I have reached out. I reached out to Alderman Janser some time ago, expressed some concerns that I've had. You know, I'm in a no-win position here, and I'm a long ways out on a branch here. And I think that my concern is for the city, and I think if we are going to move forward and maintain traction, we need to find a way to put this to rest, one way or another. And I don't like how this has come to be. I don't enjoy being up here, to be honest with you. And this is embarrassing to us as a city and to us as a staff that we have to be here. But I'm also concerned that the city is in a position of potential liability if we don't address this head on. I think, like Mr. Moss pointed out, everyone deserves their fair shake. And I wasn't involved in this whole decision to request special counsel. If I was on the other side of this, I would expect that. I would request that. You know, and an independent person should arrive at the correct conclusion. And that's my position. And I would gladly answer any questions if you have any.
Thank you, Mr. Lakefield. Any questions? Last opportunity. You would, I'm not familiar, I'm not.
Mr. Mayor, I'm Cliff Hovda,
Do you have
citizen of Minot.
standing in the argument that is
Pardon?
before us? Do you
Pardon?
have standing with the issue that is before us, Mr. Hovda?
No, but you asked anybody else would like to speak.
And I made that clear at the beginning of
I
the
heard
meeting.
that,
For
and they're in-
those with standing,
So you're not going to let me speak.
or those that have standing, sir. Thank you.
Okay. That's too bad. You had an opportunity here, citizen.
Thank you. Last call for those that have standing for comment. Any further discussion from the council before we vote? Any further discussion? If not, please call the roll.
Wolski,
Yes.
Sitma,
No.
Janser, Olson,
No.
Pittner,
Yes.
Padragula,
Yes.
Straight.
Yes.
Motion is approved. That takes us to the end of our agenda for this afternoon. We are adjourned. Oh, I'm sorry, we do have to make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Alderman Pittner, second by Alderman Janser. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Now we're adjourned.
Hey Minot, 2020 is the year for more. Yes, it's the U.S. Census season, and with it, Minot could see more. More opportunities for business, more federal funding for roads, for our schools, and for our community. Take part in something more. Take the census. Because for us, more means more. Visit minotnd.org to learn more.